Once upon a time, there was a little girl. Once her rich father married an evil stepmother. She settled in the house with her 2 daughters. Their faces were beautiful and white, but their hearts were evil and cruel. And then came a difficult time for the poor girl. From morning until late in the evening, they forced her to do dirty work, carry water, heat the stove, cook food, wash dishes, and do laundry. And besides, the half-sisters did their best to upset her as much as possible. They mocked her, poured peas and wheat into the ashes, and she had to sit and pick them out. In the evening, when she was tired of work, she had to go to bed not in bed, but on the floor, next to the stove. And because she was always in ash, dust, and dirty, the sisters called her Cinderella. But then it happened one day that the king started a feast, which was supposed to last for 3 whole days, and called all the beautiful girls of the country to the holiday so that his son could choose a bride for himself. When the 2 named sisters learned that they, too, could come to the feast, they instantly began to dress up and preen. Cinderella also wanted to go dancing, but her stepmother did not let her go, because she had no dress or shoes, and she was dirty. And then the evil stepmother poured a bowl of wheat into the ashes and said that if Cinderella collected it in 2 hours, then she could go with her sisters. Cinderella went out into the garden and cried. And then 2 white doves flew in, followed by a whole flock of different birds. They swooped down on the ash and began to peck, and so they chose all the grains in a bowl. In less than an hour, they finished their work, and everyone flew back. Cinderella brought a bowl to her stepmother, began to rejoice, thinking that she could go to the feast. But her stepmother would not let her in any way. She turned her back on Cinderella and hurried with her 2 daughters to the ball. When there was no one left at home, Cinderella sat down on the floor and cried with grief. And then 2 white doves flew in, followed by a whole flock of different birds, and they threw off their dress and shoes shiny and all in gold. She quickly put on this dress and came to the bride. They saw her stepsisters and stepmother and thought that it must be some strange princess, she was so beautiful in her golden dress. It never occurred to them that it was Cinderella. The prince came out to meet her, took her hand, and they began to dance. And he liked Cinderella so much that he did not want to dance with any other girl. She danced until the evening and wanted to return home, but the prince asked her to see her off. He wanted to know whose beautiful girl this is, and where she lives. But Cinderella ran away from him and climbed onto the dovecot. The prince ordered to destroy the dovecot, but there was no one in it. And nowhere near could he find his beautiful stranger. No one could have guessed that Cinderella was rescued by pigeons that took her home. The prince was upset and went to the palace with his head down. And suddenly he saw a shoe, lifted it up. It was so small and elegant and all of pure gold. The prince guessed that when Cinderella ran away from him, the shoe from her left foot remained on one of the steps. The prince was delighted and ordered to find the mistress of this shoe, and to whom it suits he will marry that one. The parents returned from the ball. They saw that Cinderella was asleep in her shirt on ash, and a dim light was on by the stove. Both sisters went to their rooms, hoping that tomorrow they would be lucky enough to put on the golden slipper. The next day, the prince came to their house, and said that everyone who wants to try on the shoe of his future wife should come out. 2 sisters came out, and the stepmother locked Cinderella in the house and did not let her out. The older sister tried it on a small shoe. The younger sister tried it on the shoe as great. The prince was about to leave, but Cinderella climbed out of the window and ran out to him. And she put on a shoe, and it just fit her. The prince looked into her eyes and recognized in her the very beautiful girl with whom he danced. He took Cinderella, put her on a horse and rode off to play a wedding with her. And he ordered the sisters and stepmother to be locked in their house and never let them out of there. This is how they were punished for their malice and deceit. On Christmas Eve, Fritz and Mary were looking forward to unpacking their presents. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It was their uncle with a bunch of gifts in his hands. The children were very happy to see him. Then they began to unpack the presents. Mary got fancy dolls, toy dishes, and a beautiful silk dress. Fritz also got what he wanted, a magnificent horse and a mouse king. Mary noticed that there was a soldier under the tree. It was the Nutcracker, designed to neatly crunch hard nuts. The girl really liked it. But Fritz said it was his gift and tried to take it from his sister. The children stretched the Nutcracker so far that they tore his arm off. The broken toy became unnecessary for the boy. Mary was very upset and burst into tears. But my uncle was able to repair the soldier. The girl was happy and hugged him gently. The day was very busy, so she soon got tired and fell asleep right under the tree. During her sleep, Mary heard strange sounds. They were like mouse fuss. The girl opened her eyes. The objects in the house seemed much larger than they were. And the tree under which she fell asleep became absolutely gigantic. Mary realized that it was not the objects that had increased, but that she had decreased. Suddenly, the Mouse King with his army appeared before the eyes of the astonished girl. Mary was very frightened and wanted to run away. But the giant mice stopped her. And then a miracle happened. The Nutcracker jumped to his feet and grabbed the girl. They instantly climbed the tree to the bookshelf, and along it got to Fritz's toys. There was a whole collection of tin soldiers. The Nutcracker called for help. The soldiers immediately jumped to their feet and ran after him. The Nutcracker took command of the army, and the soldiers began to fight the army of the Mouse King. The battle between toys and mice was fierce. But, unfortunately, there were too many mice, and the Nutcracker army began to suffer defeat. Mary saw this and ran out of her hiding place. She threw her shoe at the Mouse King and hit him right in the head, and he fell to the floor unconscious. The rest of the mice realized that the battle was lost and ran away in all directions. Mary ran to the Nutcracker, but he lay unconscious, as he was badly wounded by the Mouse King. The girl thought that he was dead and began to cry bitterly. And suddenly, a beautiful fairy appeared behind Mary. She decided to help the girl. With a wave of her wand, she revived the Nutcracker. With a second wave of her wand, the fairy turned the soldier into a handsome prince. Mary and Nutcracker looked at each other with loving eyes and could not take their eyes off. With a wave of her wand for the third time, the fairy took the couple in love to the kingdom of sweets. The trees there were made of candy, and the flowers were made of marmalade. It was a wonderful place. Mary closed her eyes for a second in pleasure. And suddenly, she heard the voice of her mother, who called her by name. Opening her eyes, the girl saw her mother, who looked at her in confusion. Mary also could not understand what was happening. The girl told about her wonderful journey, but her mother only smiled sweetly. Then Mary saw the pewter Nutcracker in her arms. And then she realized that she had slept under the tree all night, and everything that happened to her was just a vivid dream. A few years later, the nephew of their godfather came to visit Mary and Fritz. As soon as he entered the house, the girl almost fell to the floor in surprise. The boy looked like the Nutcracker as 2 drops of water. He also liked Mary at first sight. After some time, they got married, and lived no worse than in the magic kingdom of sweets.